The Agile Manifesto, or the Manifesto for Agile Software Development, more formally. Principles 1, 2, and 7. Now, I've chosen these three principles for one discussion because all three of these principles include the word customer. So I thought it might be helpful to carve them out and try to see what the message here is really all about. Now, the first principle of the Agile Manifesto reads, our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable software. Our highest priority, and that's number one. I don't know if the founders of this document laid out 1 through 12 in order. I don't think that was the case, but the very first one does say our highest priority is to satisfy the customer. And how do we do that? Through early and continuous delivery of valuable software. Early and continuous. Get to work as soon as possible. Don't wait long stretches of time before you start building things. And continuous delivery. Repeatedly deliver things. Make sure that you're focusing on the most valuable things that your customer is looking for. Principle number 2 talks about welcoming changing requirements. Now, I'm going to hold off on principle 2, and I want to jump to 7 and then come back to 2 because 2 is a little bit controversial. So, sticking with the theme of principle 1, principle 7 tells us that working software is the primary measure of progress. Now, I do a lot of work with companies that aren't building software, and the Agile Manifesto uses that word software here and there. So if you're not in the software world, you can simply try replacing the word software, even though this is a copyrighted statement, with products or services, right? So I could argue working software, working products, working services, those things might fit in your particular case. Working software is the primary measure of progress. Again, here we go. This word primary, the primary measure of progress. Now, I think this is really helpful, particularly for those of us from a more traditional background, because measuring progress comes in many different forms. And one of the more traditional forms of measuring progress has to do with things like percent complete. And for those of you that have measured percent complete, you probably can say that you've been in situations where we could indicate 80% complete, but that last 20% ends up taking up over 50% of the project budget and timeline, and oftentimes extending, right, that budget and timeline. So if we measure working product, working software, working services, we're measuring things that are complete. If you're familiar with earned value management systems, right, one of the models, one of the ways we can measure is either 100% value or 0% value. It's either there and it's done and it's working, or it's not. Partially complete doesn't count. I'm a big fan of that. Great way to measure progress. Also related to the idea of definition of done, which we'll discuss in another session. Okay, so let's flip back to principle number 2. Principle number 2 reads, welcome changing requirements, even late in development. Agile processes harness change for the customer's competitive advantage. That's all part of the same statement. And the element that tends to get people's attention is around this idea of changing requirements even late in development. That tends to cause a certain level of discomfort with our product development people. What I like to focus on is the first word, welcome changing requirements, even late in development. Welcome changes. That doesn't necessarily mean there is not a cost. Typically, what happens when teams get late changes, they start to become anxious and try to figure out how we're going to get this in, how disruptive is it going to be, how are we still going to meet our deadline? Well, why not respond with, hey, you have a change? No problem. Let's talk about it. You must be asking for this change late in the delivery cycle because it must be really important to you. Maybe it's something that's going to give you a competitive advantage. Maybe you learn something new in the marketplace and you realize that the work that you currently have laid out for us is not going to be the best thing for you and you have to change direction on that. I'm so glad that you're so aware that you understand that. Let's talk about the implications. How can we get this done for you? A change possibly could cost nothing. But if that change is going to cost us in terms of finances, in terms of schedule, then we need to communicate that back to the requester, back to the customer and say, hey, we understand what you want. We want to get this done for you. Here are some of the implications. If nothing else changes, we're going to have to extend the deadline. If nothing else changes, this is going to cost you more money. Maybe you want to swap something out. Maybe you're willing to accept the additional cost and schedule. But the Agile Manifesto does not say that we have to jump whenever our customer says, and all we do is ask how high. We're collaborative delivery partners. Adopt an attitude of welcome, but understand you're still professional that has to respond with reality. I hope you find this helpful. We have other sessions that are focusing on the other principles. Please take a look. Thank you.